Hello, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at.
Come and get me.
A war of words between Governor Pritzker and President Trump escalates. We have the latest on that and National Guard troops on the ground in Illinois. Advocates push for more inclusion of black communities from the city's south and west sides in the ongoing transit debate.
He had a fan base like no other.
And former Washington Post culture critic Robin Givhan chronicles fashion icon Virgil Abloh's life and legacy in a new book. First off tonight, President Donald Trump is calling for Mayor Brandon Johnson and Governor J.B. Pritzker to be jailed. The threat, posted on Truth Social, comes as hundreds of National Guard troops gather near Joliet, preparing to hit the streets of Chicago. Our Heather Sharon joins us now with the latest. Heather, did the president say why the governor and the mayor should be jailed?
Without offering any evidence, he said that the governor and the mayor had not done enough to protect immigration enforcement agents in Chicago. Now, his post poured gasoline on an already raging firestorm about the response of CPD to a Brighton Park shooting by federal agents on Saturday. Now, both Governor Pritzker and Mayor Johnson reacted defiantly. We heard Governor Pritzker say, "Come and get me." Mayor Johnson said that he would not be the first black person that Trump has threatened to wrongfully arrest.
Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling forcefully defending his department's response to that shooting that sparked protests. Let's take a listen.
Our officers were out there throughout the entire event. I would never tell our officers to stand down, because if our officers were in trouble and we needed help from other officers, I would expect those officers to step in and help us.
Heather, what exactly happened in Brighton Park?
A woman has been charged with intentionally ramming a car driven by a federal agent. That federal agent shot her 5 times. That shooting sparked immediate protests from residents of Brighton Park, which is a primarily Latino community. Federal agents called CPD for help, saying they were surrounded. And at least initially, there's evidence that CPD brass gave an order not to respond. However, as we heard the superintendent say, officers did respond. In fact, dozens of officers were exposed to tear gas fired by federal agents who left the scene several hours later.
So 200 Texas National Guard troops operating under federal authority. They are awaiting orders to deploy Chicago. They are near Joliet right now. Do we have any more information about what their mission, what their orders are?
We do not. We have no indication they've left that federal facility in the south suburbs. We will know more after a hearing tomorrow in front of U.S. District Court Judge April Perry, who's scheduled to decide whether Illinois and Chicago have met the burden they need for a temporary restraining order.
And what can we expect from that hearing tomorrow?
Well, we won't know until midnight precisely the answers to the questions that the Department of Justice has been asked. Where are these troops going to go? What are they going to do? April Perry, the judge, has scheduled at least some oral argument at tomorrow's hearing, and she has said she will rule as quickly as possible.
Correct, and tonight at midnight, because that is the deadline for the federal government to respond to the lawsuit that the state has issued. Heather Sharon, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. It is all at WTTW.com/news. Also tonight, ICE's immigration crackdown in Chicago may also be to blame for an international soccer game that was slated for Soldier Field to instead be happening in Florida. The friendly match between Argentina and Puerto Rico was set for October 13th, this Monday. You're looking at a promotional video for it here. But an Argentine Football Association official tells the Associated Press that the game is being moved to Fort Lauderdale because of the immigration sweeps in Chicago. More than 1,000 immigrants have been arrested since the crackdown began last month. Former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. announces he's running for his old seat in Congress.
On my life's journey, I've borne the burden of self-inflicted pain and suffering. I've learned that we cannot be born again from our mother's womb. We must be born again of a new spirit, a new hope. We must build strength in all of our broken places, and we must do this together. I am responding to a draft movement to enter this race. Like my father before me, I ask for your vote as a vote for a new direction for this district. birthday of a man.
Jackson says he's making the announcement on the 84th birthday of his father, civil rights icon Jesse Jackson Sr., who inspired his entrance into politics. Once a rising star of the Democratic Party, Jackson Jr. was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison over the misuse of campaign funds. The seat he's running for is currently held by Congresswoman Robin Kelly, who is instead running for Senate. This year's crop of 22 MacArthur Fellows, also known as geniuses, includes a familiar face to many Chicagoans, photographer and social justice artist Tanika Lewis-Johnson.
Growing up in Inglewood, every part of my life has been touched by segregation, and I know that to be true about everyone who lives in this city. So it really was a story that I wanted to tell and use my art, my photography, my passion for history to package all of that in a way that would be able to connect to the larger public. It's truly about...
Lewis-Johnson is well known for documenting the city's racial segregation through her folded map project and public art installation called Inequity for Sale to expose the causes of deterioration and impact of disinvestment in Southside neighborhoods. Lewis-Johnson uses photography, maps, and multimedia storytelling to illustrate the city's racial disparities while also creating pathways for residents to participate in the process of repair. Up next, advocates push for more equitable public transit reform.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
Chicago area public transit agencies are facing a fiscal cliff. The budget gap for CTA, Metra, and PACE is at $200 million, according to the Regional Transit Agency. While that's down from a $771 million estimate earlier this year, transit officials are warning without more funding, service cuts and layoffs could still hit next year. As state lawmakers head to Springfield next week to discuss a possible funding plan, some advocates say Black communities on the city's south and west sides are being ignored in decisions about transit reform. Joining us now with more are Denise Barreto, former Chief Equity and Engagement Officer for the Chicago Transit Authority, Adam Slade, Director of State Fiscal Policy at the Illinois Black Advocacy Initiative, and on Zoom, State Representative Cam Buckner, who represents parts of the Loop and the city's south sides. We also invited the Chicago Transit Authority, but they declined. We welcome the three of you. Thanks for joining us. Denise, let's start with you, please. So you wrote in an op-ed that was published in the Chicago Tribune a few weeks ago that Black voices are often pushed out of the discussion about transit. How so?
Well, when I think about the folks that you see at the day-to-day at our board meetings, at the RTA board meetings, the folks doing witness slips, the organizing around this discussion, there are very few Black faces that are in that, and I acknowledge the ones that I saw, but there's quite a few folks that are just not there. And Black people power transit, not just at CTA. Black people power transit in the Northeast, and I believe that our voices need to be heard.
So you say they aren't there, they're not showing up. That is optional, of course, to show up. So how are they being pushed out or not encouraged to
it's both.
show up?
I think it's both, because when the only opportunities to have our daytime meetings at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday once a month, I think the RTA meetings are also during the day. When you have one budget hearing, when you have town halls that are there's not a lot of outreach in neighborhoods with community organizations, there's lots of ways that I could point to. It's just an inequitable system when it comes to giving feedback and whose voices are listened to.
Representative Buckner, is this something that you've experienced in Springfield? Is this something that you feel like is also not happening, these voices not being heard or being pushed out when the conversation is happening?
Well, I'll be clear about this. The way that our systems have always worked, we've had to always try a little harder to make sure that Black voices are centered. Now, as a Black man who lives on the south side of Chicago, who is one of the chief negotiators of this transit conversation. I have gone out to have conversations with Black groups around the city in places like Woodlawn and the Equitable folks and on the west side in Austin and North Lawndale to figure out once again how to center these voices. We know that the data shows a stark reality. Black Chicagoans suffer from a worse transit situation and experience than Chicagoans around the region who are not Black. And so one of the charges for me in this conversation is to make sure that I'm centering my own experiences, but talking to folks, whether those are bus and train operators, whether those are folks who work at the stations, whether those are people who are using these systems every single day to have these conversations.
Adam, what does fair and equitable public transit in the region look like? What should it look like?
Fair and equitable transit is a great dream that I wish we could realize in Illinois, especially in the Northeast region. Fair and equitable means that all communities have access to major institutions in their neighborhood. I know being able to get to the grocery store, or being able to get to the hospital, or being able to get to your place of employment quickly and efficiently and safely, all are the dream of a good regional transit system.
Representative Buckner, does this smaller fiscal cliff that we talked about, down to $200 million from $771 million, does that take a little bit of the pressure off of lawmakers to come up with a solution? A little bit of pressure to maybe wait until the spring session versus veto session?
I will say that the pressure, while it may seem like it's less, it really is still very necessary. The RTA update that took the clip from $770 million to under $300 million, it's a huge swing. But it really also underscores why this work is important, because we want to know how to get to that number. And the way the system works right now is opaque and it's not transparent enough for us to figure that out. And so I've been very clear with my colleagues and with my constituents that we have only two options here. One option is to continue to kick the can down the road and pretend as if nothing is happening. Or the second option is to actually do something, do it urgently and do it intentionally so we can move the system along. So the Black folks and the folks around this city and this region who take transit, who operate transit, and who use it as a backbone of our economy can do so in the right way.
According to responses from a regional transit authority passenger survey, Black people make up 40% of PACE's rider base, 27% of CTA's rider base, and 13% of Metra's rider base. Denise, folks may look at these numbers and say, okay, well, Black people just aren't using the CTA. What difference does it make if their voices are included any more than they already are? What do you say to that sentiment?
Well, first I start with Black workers. Like 73% of the people that work at the CTA are Black people. The second thing is that's based on RTA's customer service surveys that they put out. I always think that those are always undercounted for folks in our community. And then I think the final thing, it has to do with access. In the Black community, we have a car culture. If you live somewhere where it takes you 2 hours to get places, you aspire to have a car, and you'd rather have a car than have to wait the times that they have to wait for the bus or not have train access like folks in Altgeld Gardens. And so I think it's unfair to look at RTA's numbers around Black people and their ridership, because it's not accurate. And then the final thing I will say is when the cuts that were made back in 2008, you look at the access, Black people have more access bus-wise before those last set of cuts that happen. And so it's sort of a build it, they come sort of thing. We just reintroduced some different services, and when you have the service and it's frequent, people use it.
To that point, Adam, would Black ridership be higher if there were changes, improvements to service?
Absolutely, 100%. One of the main pieces that we heard last week was that the federal funding for the Red Line extension was cut to the far south side, and this touches Denise's point about access to service. We have significant gaps on the south side for access to transit and regular bus schedules. And if folks could access transit, they would take it and they would love it, especially if they haven't been used to having that kind of amenity in their community, and it would connect them to the wider region as well.
Yeah, we just had a conversation on this program last night, of course, about the Red Line cuts. Representative Buckner, what kind of conversations are you having with suburban lawmakers who say that the proposed reforms to local transit leaves too much control in the hands of the city?
I'm reminding them that this is a regional system, and it's a regional ecosystem. And as Chicago goes, so goes the rest of the region. And so when you talk about the collar counties, DuPage and Lake and Will and McHenry. What has to happen is that we have to figure out how we work together hand in hand to build a consensus system that doesn't just work for the folks in my district in Woodline and South Shore and Bronzeville, but also works for the folks in places like Elgin and Algonquin and the places that Metro goes to in the south suburbs that is heavily serviced by PACE. We have to stop this siloed thinking. And I'm having that conversation with many of my colleagues, and many of them do understand it. It's really just us reprogramming ourselves to not refight the fights of the past and create a system that works for the future.
Denise, 20 seconds left. How do you get more people involved in making their voices heard?
Well, first of all, I thank you for having this segment tonight, because I think getting the word out to folks, I think talking to faith-based organizations and community organizations, that's what I'll be doing. I'm a private citizen advocate now, and that's what I'll be doing.
Okay, well, so we'll leave it. We'll listen out for more of your advocacy. Denise Barreto, Adam Slade, and Representative Cam Buckner. Thanks to all of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And up next, exploring the life and legacy of late fashion icon Virgil Abloh. Visionary Chicagoland native Virgil Abloh shifted what luxury means and who gets to participate in it. The streetwear-loving son of Ghanaian immigrants from Rockford went on to become the first African-American artistic director of a French luxury fashion house, doing so without formal training. But as the book, Make It Ours, Crashing the Gates of Culture with Virgil Abloh, author Robin Givhan shows us, Abloh was so much more than a fashion maker. Joining us now is the book's author, Robin Givhan, a fashion icon to me anyway, in her own right, and former senior critic at large at the Washington Post. Thanks for joining us. It's good to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we say fashion maker instead of designer. He didn't really refer to himself that way, did he?
Yeah, I mean, that's an Abloh word. That's a Virgil word. He liked to consider himself a creator, a maker. He didn't really use the word designer, in part because he really revered designers. He had a great deal of respect for them, and he was hesitant to sort of put himself into that category.
You've covered fashion for some time, obviously. You've written other books, a long time. You've written other books. Why Virgil Abloh? Why did you want to write this book?
Well, he was historic because of his rise at Vuitton, and because as I'd been writing about him over the years, both covering his menswear under his own collection and also his women's, I was critical of it, because this was not someone who was formally trained. And so looking at it, I think, through the traditional lens of fashion, sometimes the work didn't, the clothes didn't fit as well as perhaps they should have. He was deeply influenced by a lot of other designers and ideas, and so sometimes you saw echoes of other people's work. But at the same time, he had a fan base like no other. And it was sort of that tension, if you will, that was intriguing to me. And it was something I wanted to explore.
So as you mentioned, you were initially a harsher critic of him, or tougher critic, before
yes,
you tough critic. Before you began to focus more on his, like you said, his expansive cultural impact rather than distinctiveness, sometimes lack of distinctiveness. He had the 3% rule that we'll come back to if there's time in his designs. And in the book you write, quote, Abloh began with a t-shirt, but he wasn't attempting to perfect a particular silhouette or drape. It was not a performance t-shirt. He was creating an identity, a name. If a t-shirt could be an expression of tribalism for music lovers and sports fans, then it could be that for fashion devotees as well. And a t-shirt, a big unisex garment that required no tailoring and was easy and inexpensive to mass produce, was the perfect slate on which to write the beginnings of his fashion story. What was it about a t-shirt that he was able to pull off and get on to people?
Yeah, I mean, fashion had been changing over the years, and some of the biggest changes happened in menswear. When we think about the biggest trends, really, of the last few years, things like the blurring of gender, athleisure, sneaker culture, all of that comes from the menswear side. And that is where sort of the power of t-shirts came from as well. And it was this idea that you could connect with like-minded people. You could sort of form a community, a team, if you will. And so Virgil used a t-shirt to introduce his brand, and his brand was off-white. And instead of that brand being based on a particular garment, the way that, Gucci is based on, Gucci loafers, or Dior is based on a particular silhouette of a jacket or a Chanel handbag, Virgil used off-white as the brand. And then he decided afterwards, here are the things that I'll put underneath my brand. But it was the brand that he gave meaning to, and that was the t-shirt.
So, as we've mentioned, he was a true polymath, right? A DJ, an architect by training, little to no formal fashion training. He had that one internship.
Yes.
You write that he was a promiscuous collaborator.
Yes, he was.
How did all of those, all of that makes him an artist, right? How did all of that influence his work?
Well, he was really kind of, I describe it as, sort of the cut and paste generation. He was very much of a mind, had a DJ's mindset that you can take, to continue the DJ metaphor, the lyrics and the melody that other people created, and you can rework it, you can sample, you can mix it, and what you create is unique, even though you didn't create all of the sort of, raw materials. And that's really the way that he worked when it came to fashion. It's why he loved to collaborate, because it allowed him to tweak things, to put his own spin on things, and also to kind of signal to his fan base that, there was a do-it-yourself mentality about his work, and to signal to them that they could do it as well, that they didn't have to have the sort of prescribed skills that fashion always demanded, but that they might have these other skills that were equally as valuable, just different.
You can make your own thing.
You can make your own thing.
So you've written, I want to shift gears just a little bit, because if people want to know more, then they got to read the book. So you've also written extensively, though, about how fashion can often be a political statement. A big statement was made at New York Fashion Week last month when Actively Black founder Lanny Smith paid tribute to living civil rights icons and their children by having them walk the runway with images of themselves or younger selves or parents projected on the wall. Of course, civil rights icon Ruby Bridges received a standing ovation at the end. What was your reaction to seeing this this demonstration, to seeing that show and hearing about it?
Well, I did not see the show, but I always feel that fashion is such a powerful form of communication because it's extremely intimate. And it's something that we all have to participate in some way. And even for those who say, oh, I'm not interested in fashion, that sort of pushing it away is, in fact, a way of participating. It's setting yourself apart from it. And for whatever reasons you choose to do that, that says something about you. That says something about how you want to be perceived as you move through the world. And so, when I think about the civil rights era, one of the first things that I think about is the idea of respectability, and not necessarily the idea of sort of demanding respectability, respect from others, but it's also an exuding respect for yourself when it may be denied you from others. And I think that continues today for a lot of young people, particularly young Black men, who use fashion as a way of showing how much they value themselves, and as an extension of that, saying to other people, you should value me as well.
It's certainly been a year of sort of recognizing that. We don't have time to get into all of it, of course, but the Met Gala this year and the theme being super fine, tailoring Black style, paying homage to, the influence that Black men have had on the industry as well. Before we let you go, another sort of pivot, you were the premier, of course, fashion critic and culture critic at the Post for some time, recently accepted the buyout offer. What made you choose that step this time?
Well, when you say this time, it was...
Well, not this time, but at this time.
Yeah, it was the first time it was something that was made available to me. And I think, I'd been covering the fashion industry for a long time. I'd been at the Post for a very long time. And it felt like it was an opportunity to move on and try some new things, perhaps devote myself full-time to books, or just step into a new role elsewhere with a little bit of wind at my back.
Okay, well, we look forward to seeing what that next step is. Robin Givhan, pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Again, the book is called Make It Ours, Crashing the Gates of Culture with Virgil Abloh. And we're back right after this. And that is our show for this Wednesday night. You can stream Chicago Tonight on our WTTW YouTube channel every evening and catch up on any programs you may have missed. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. What tomorrow's court hearing could mean for the deployment of military troops in the Chicago area. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports inclusionary excellence throughout the legal profession.